Thank you so much for being with us. So Donald Trump says, in his words, he's agreed the framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland and the entire Arctic region. Do you know what is in this framework?
Well, we've had 2 weeks of very robust diplomacy. We've been unwavering in our principles and calm and very coordinated with our allies and pursuing UK's national interests. So I hope this means we are now in a much better place to actually focus on what the real issues should be, which is our collective Arctic security, how NATO countries work together, respecting sovereignty, respecting our collective security in the face of shared threats, particularly from Russia. So what I hope this now means is there will be a lot of work through NATO on those collective security threats and also the direct discussions that Denmark had asked for Denmark, Greenland and the United States on the way forward around Greenland, protecting Greenland's sovereignty.
Because the question obviously was, do you know what is in the deal? It doesn't sound to me like from that answer like you do. And Donald Trump says everybody's very happy with the deal. I mean, how can we be happy with it if we don't know what's in it?
Well, I think there are two things now that I would expect to happen. The first is a return to some of the discussions that Denmark and Greenland had asked for with the United States, where they had begun those discussions in Washington last week, and that's what they want to focus on, is some very practical discussions about Greenland's security, whilst being very, very clear that Greenland's sovereignty is not up for negotiation. What I've been calling for is a wider programme of work, which I think...
Sorry, just come in. Do we know what is in the deal?
Sorry, Sophie. Yeah, go on.
Do we know what is in the deal?
I think this is about... No, I think this is about both two things. First of all, some direct discussions between the US and Denmark, but secondly, and Greenland as well, and secondly, about something that I've been calling for, that the UK has been calling for, which is a sort of Arctic sentry, which is very similar to the approach that NATO has taken to the Baltic sentry, to the Eastern sentry, where countries work together through NATO, a kind of collective framework to security. And that's what I hope we now can focus on, and that's what I hope a lot of the NATO discussions have been about.
The Telegraph are reporting that in this kind of agreement, this framework, the United States would control parts of Greenland by designating them as sovereign base areas under the terms of this kind of proposed deal, a bit like how the UK has with Cyprus, I guess. Is that something that you would find acceptable?
So I think we should just be very clear about this. The principles that we have been talking about are about the sovereignty of Greenland and Denmark. That means the future of Greenland is a matter for Greenland and for Denmark alone. So they want to be able to have constructive discussions with the US about practical security arrangements. There is already a 1951 treaty between the Kingdom of Denmark and the United States around security in Greenland. So they want to be able to have those very practical discussions, but this really is a matter for them. It's a matter for the Greenlanders, it's a matter for Denmark, and it's a matter for them working with the United States.
Can I be honest, because I'm not really clear what you're saying in response to these questions, whether or not you know what's in the agreement and whether or not, you know, this is something that's on the table, whether it's something that would be acceptable to you?
So my understanding, Sophie, is that what we have here is a process going forward. There's going to be a lot of further work going forward, both through NATO as part of some of the things we have called for on Arctic sentry, and also directly discussions between the US and Greenland and Denmark themselves. So that is my understanding of what is now going to happen.
Are we going to be part of those? Sorry,
those same principles.
Are we going to be part of those discussions? Are you going to have a seat at the table as Foreign Secretary?
So when it comes to NATO and the work across NATO, then I do expect the UK to be involved in the approach for NATO, because the UK is already heavily involved in the Arctic. It's why I visited the north of Norway last week, and it's why the UK is currently doubling the number of Marines in the north of Norway over a period of 3 years, because we know that the Arctic security affects all of our security. The Arctic is the gateway for the Russian Northern Fleet to be able to to move down to threaten the United Kingdom, to threaten Europe, to threaten the United States and to threaten Canada. And that's why this really is about our collective security, and it's why we've been arguing for a stronger approach across NATO. So yes, the UK would strongly expect to be part of that NATO programme.
One thing that's pretty clear in this whole kind of roller coaster on Greenland, if I can put it that way, is that the European mission to Greenland went down pretty badly in the US, right? You know, we only sent one person, but we know that Keir Starmer had to explain to Donald Trump on Sunday about the motivation behind that. Donald Trump said he may have been misinformed about the motivation for deploying European troops to Greenland. I guess, you know, my question is, isn't that your job as Foreign Secretary to, you know, make sure the US know what we're doing? It shouldn't be up to Keir Starmer to have to, you know, get on the phone to Donald Trump and to clarify things. Does that feed into concerns that, I guess, you know, you're not really that well connected with Washington?
Well, I think it's a reflection of the strength of our connections in Washington, that we've obviously had a very significant shift in the president's position over the last 2 weeks. The fact that we've been doing very determined diplomacy, not just directly the Prime Minister talking to the president, but also talking at every level. I've spoken to Secretary of State Rubio. We have also spoken to many people across not just the US administration, but also Congress as well. And we have done so with our allies. We've done that in a very calm and coordinated way, but also a very determined way, and one that has also been very clear about sticking by our principles, defending the sovereignty for Greenland and for Denmark, and also being very practical about what is in the UK's national interest. I think that is the right approach to take. We've taken that throughout.
There's been, I guess, two ways of kind of looking at this, because, as you say, we have got to a position now with Donald Trump where I think everyone can breathe a slight sigh of relief. You could argue that, you know, the Keir Starmer approach has been right, you know, keeping Donald Trump on side, keeping those communication lines open, always taking everything that he says literally. Or you could say that actually this is thanks to the people who have been really, really tough. You know, people like Mike Carney, for example, who really stood against Donald Trump, and as a result, he's had to back down. What would you say?
I think there has been a coordinated approach across allies. You heard Keir Starmer yesterday in Parliament making extremely clear not just our unwavering support for the principle of sovereignty, but also making clear that we wouldn't yield to US pressure on other issues, that this was extremely important. These principles were important. We would continue to defend them. And I think it's been us being very clear to US colleagues across the board, our determination that we are not going to move on those principles, alongside us putting forward very practical arguments about how damaging all of this has been and the need for us now to focus on the collective security threats. The fact that it's been the UK pushing forward more practical approaches to Arctic security more widely, a constructive approach where we have shared threats we need to focus on. And that is what I think all of us need to focus on now, because some of those biggest shared threats is about the threat from Russia to Ukraine, as well as the threat from Russia through the Arctic. That's what we should now be focusing on. I hope we can keep that focus on what is happening in Ukraine, where temperatures are considerably lower than they are here in Davos, and we have a lot of people who are suffering without energy and without power as a result of Russian aggression. That's what we should be focusing on, as well as pulling together across the NATO alliance.
I'm very keen to ask, finally, on Ukraine as well. There's been a kind of breakfast ongoing. The US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff has been talking about the fact he's going to be going over to Moscow. He says that there's only one issue outstanding on a peace deal for Ukraine. How optimistic are you that there could be some kind of agreement, and I guess the most important thing, that it would be acceptable to the people of Ukraine?
Well, I think this partly goes back to some of the sovereignty principles again, that this is obviously a matter for Ukraine, but Ukraine has been doing some phenomenal work with the United States, looking at issues backed by Europe as well, on things like having security guarantees for Ukraine so that they can move to a peace process. I would say the big test in my mind is Putin serious about peace? Because I haven't yet seen any signs that he is. That is what we need to see. I still think we're going to need more pressure on Russia to bring them to the table, but I really, really hope that actually, in fact, we will see some progress. But really, Putin needs to now show he is ready for peace.
Yvette Cooper, Foreign Secretary, thank you very much for being on the programme this morning.
Thank you, Sophie.